juggling all this, but we'll see how it goes. This Logan family history came about probably a couple years ago. I was hiking with a friend, and she mentioned to her husband that I was related to the Logans from Logan Pass. So he calls me up one day in, I think, January, February this year and said, would you like to come talk to a few people about the Logan family history? And I said, sure, and pretty soon it's going to be 50 or 60 people and a PowerPoint. And I said, I have no idea what a PowerPoint is, but we have one now, thanks to my son, Brian. And I'd like to thank you for having me here today. I guess I'd have been here anyway, but as the speaker. My paternal grandmother, my dad's mom, was Mary Llewellyn Logan, Orser, and this does turn, right? You know, I would like to do that.
We're good then.
Not working.
This happened the last time I did this. Oh, there we go. It's going. Or did you do it?
I hit it. Let's see if we got it. I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. We're back.
Oh, perfect.
I just had to wake it up.
Good. Okay, thank you. This is a picture of my grandmother with her sisters at Lake McDonald Lodge, or not the lodge, I'm sorry, at Charlie Russell's cabin. And Charlie Russell is on the far, or Nancy's on the far left, and then Charlie Russell and my grandmother's about in the middle with the polka dot hat on. And then there are a bunch of rangers and things that are there, but they were all camping at Fish Creek, which incidentally is where Bob and I got married, and that was where the first headquarters was for the park. Charlie Russell, you know, is the artist. Everybody know that? Okay. This is a picture of my great-grandfather, Sidney Martin Logan, and he was the 5th mayor of Kalispell and an attorney, and he was also the first county attorney. While he was in office, the Carnegie Library, which is now the Hockaday Museum, or I guess it is a museum, and then also City Hall were built, as well as all the maple trees on all the avenues in Kalispell were all planted. There. Oh, and I just told you about that. Also, there's a Logan State Park on the way to Libby, and that was named in his honor. He was instrumental in getting that road built. And so there's a park that's dedicated to him. This is at the memorial when my dad was little with all of his cousins, and it names them all there. This is the Logan House. It's 2 blocks south of the Conrad Mansion on Woodland Avenue in Kalispell. And this is where my my grandmother was born and raised with her 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Oh, he doesn't show up. Well, sorry about that. That's Major William Logan, who was my great-grandfather's brother. And as it says, he worked as a packer and a scout in Glacier from 1882 to 83, worked on the Blackfeet Indian agents for the Blackfeet Indian Agency. He was appointed the U.S. Indian agent at Fort Belknap, which is also the reservation where I had my first teaching job. And he was the first superintendent of Glacier and in charge of the trail and road construction. Road building in Glacier road building to make Glacier more accessible was one of Major Logan's early concerns. The construction of 42.5 miles of telephone lines, 9 telephones, docks, and new buildings occupied much of the superintendent's time. He also believed that the government should build accommodations for the tourists, and he remarked, "I shall also, for the convenience of the public, build a number of Swiss chalets, which would be rented to tourists. The general plan of construction will be the Swiss style of architecture, as this park in time will be known as the Switzerland of America." if you've ever been to any of the chalets or the lodges in the park. As you probably know, it was not the government, but Great Northern Railroad who built the chalets and parks and hotels in the parks. Logan conveyed his personal enthusiasm for Glacier Park in a report that he presented at a conference of National Park Superintendents at Yellowstone in September of 1911. He discussed the problems encountered with the fires in 1910, as well as the general construction program that included going to the Sun Highway. It was his desire to, and I quote, "develop the park as rapidly as possible, keeping in mind the future day when the American traveling public will at least realize the beauties of their own country are unsurpassed anywhere in the world, and our national parks will come into their own." Logan returned to Glacier to resume his administrative duties, but early snows brought the construction season to a rapid close, with just 3.5 miles of the road completed. In late October, the headquarters were moved from Fish Creek to Apgar, to the Belton Chalets. He left his trusted friend, Harry Hutchings, in charge of the park and returned east with his family. In the ensuing months, Logan's health deteriorated. During his illness, he continued formulating plans for Glacier's future and requested larger appropriations for the park development. Finally, he was taken to Chicago, where he died February 7, 1912, of kidney failure, less than 1 year after being named superintendent. So you see, he was only superintendent for a short time, but his accomplishments can still be seen today in the trail system and, of course, going to the Sun Road, as Logan foresaw, through a mountain pass from the east side to the west around Lake McDonald. It was completed in 1933 and signified a major engineering accomplishment. There are 2 lakes in the park that were named for his daughters, Lake Janet and Lake Francis. And although they both married, there are no known descendants. Grandpa Sidney and William's father was Captain William Logan, and he was descended from a Scottish family. One of their ancestors being Robert the Bruce, whose ambition was to visit the Holy Land to capture it back from the Saracens. On his deathbed, Robert the Bruce asked his friend Douglas to carry his heart to the scene of the crucifixion. It was taken in a silver casket and hurled into the thick of the battle, as Douglas cried, "Go first, brave heart, as thou in battle were wont, and Douglas will follow thee." And I'm sure you've at least heard of the movie Braveheart, where that came from. The heart and casket were later recovered, pierced by a Saracen spear. The bleeding heart has since been part of the Scottish history tradition. And this is our family crest. In the battle during the Crusades, there were 2 ancestors of Captain William Logan, Walter and Robert. One was killed, and the other married the granddaughter of Robert the Bruce. And there's a picture then, like I said again, of the Logan family crest, and it's pierced by a passion nail. Also in the picture, oh, and it doesn't show up either, interesting. Anyway, the Logan plaid is over on the left-hand side. Looks nice, doesn't it? Yeah, well, yeah, I know. I don't know what happened. Captain William Logan was born to Thomas Dawson Logan, who was a respected rector and vicar of the Charleston Church in the parish of Aldie, County of Louth in Ireland. When he immigrated to America at the age of 16 or 17, his father gave him 2 rings, one bearing the Logan family crest. And interestingly, when we looked this up online, this church is for sale, if anybody's interested. And it was really not, I mean, it was not horribly expensive. It was like $40,000 or something. So if you've got some extra money and want to move to Ireland.
Buy yourself a church.
Yes.
Oh, maybe. Wow.
Okay, there we go. We'll go back here. In 1877, Captain Logan fought at the Battle of the Big Hole that was in southwest Montana. That's not to be confused with General Custer's battle of the Little Big Horn. Although Captain Logan was one of the first white men on the scene after the massacre. At this battle, he was, let's see, after shooting a Nez Perce Indian, they were told not to shoot the women or children. The sister of the Indian that he had just shot picked up the gun and killed him at the Battle of the Big Hole. He was stripped of his uniform, scalped, and the fingers that were bearing these rings were cut off. His widow advertised in Army and Navy journals and Montana territorial newspapers. About 3 years after his death, a Nez Perce Indian was killed near the Canadian border by a Blackfeet who took the rings from him. Years later, a friend of Captain Logan's in Fort Benton recognized and bought them from a trapper. They eventually got back to my great-great-grandmother Logan in Helena, and my cousin Sidney Logan, who lives in Alaska, has both those rings, and a few years ago brought them to a family reunion. So we got to actually see them. This is a picture of it must be 2 years ago, wasn't it? The reunion. It's labeled. But this is most of the Logan family up at Grandpa's Memorial, up at Logan State Park. And that's it for the Logan history, and I'll tell you a little bit about me more later.